I'm Pam Moran. I'm superintendent in Albemarle County Public Schools. And the reason why I really love the iSTEM lab project is because anytime our kids get a chance to see themselves as makers, they are engaged learners who have a real sense of voice and agency. So I see myself as being both a champion and supporter of the work that's going on in our school division and other places to bring this work alive. Well, I just go back in history and say that some of the original makers were map makers. And one of the things that we know is that map making has been used for all kinds of purposes over history, from being able to figure out where to explore, being able to map explorations for other people. And at some level, even today, when we talk about geographic information systems or GIS, what you have are people who are exploring, in this case, big data, and figuring out how to tell stories with it, just as the early map makers did with their maps. So what I really see is that being able to bring that into our schools, high schools and even our middle schools, helps to really keep alive that sense of that people are explorers, people are makers, and that when you bring the two together, what you have in this day and age, 21st century map making, is about GIS. First projects I ever saw were a group of kids that were working with data around crimes in one of the major cities in the United States, and this was at Western Albemarle High School. And I was absolutely intrigued because the kids were so into the project that they were doing. And what really struck me as I watched them and subsequently have seen some middle school kids working as well as kids here at Albemarle High School is that when kids start to really get intrigued by the data and the story it's telling, all of a sudden you have kids that are incredibly engaged. They feel like that they want to dig deeper. And then what starts to happen, which I just recently saw here watching some projects at Albemarle High School that were being presented, is that kids are integrating history, science, economics, technology, engineering, math, communication, that you really are getting what you might call true project-based learning experiences that come alive on the screen as kids are sharing their data. One that I particularly loved recently was a young man who built a project around World War II in Poland. And what he was able to do was to really map a variety of different data points that included both battle scenes or sites, as well as looking at some of the places where there were concentration camps set up. And in that case, what he also did was to draw down pictures from the National Archives, images, and add text, and created this fabulous story. And one of the folks that was looking at this project said, you really need to put this up on a website because there are historians and researchers all over who would really love to see this project. So when you see that, what you get are kids who get their work reinforced, but are not just consumers of information off of the internet. This young man is now a producer of information that could inform a much larger audience through his work. Well, it's a really interesting question when you think about workforce preparedness and anything that we do in schools today, because it's hard to really watch the trends that are emerging from the past and be able to pay them forward and say, well, in 2040, this is what life's going to be like. What I really see that comes out of something like the iSTEM lab work and GIS is that it's what you might call the bigger skill sets, the competencies that kids are developing that help them become learners for a lifetime, so that the maps on the screens behind me may look very different, and the tools to develop that kind of work may be very different in another 2 decades. But it's the skills that kids are gaining, the analysis skills, the creative problem-solving skills, the integration skill sets, the research skills, the critical thinking work that they're doing, problem-solving that they're doing. When you put that all together and you look at it through the lens of communication, what you have are kids that are developing incredible skill sets around the ways that they approach work in today's world that will be as usable, I would say, in another 2 decades as it is today, even though the tools may change. engaged in figuring out how the work of GIS actually helps kids engage in work that transfers into any curriculum. So when you think about that a teacher can take this into science, they can take it into math, they can take it into history, they can take it into communication and even language arts. When you start to bring that together and de-silo the content, what you create is a context for learning that's very different. So I see GIS curriculum as offering opportunities for teachers to really create a context for learning that's very different than learning the content in isolation of how does it apply in the real world. In this day and age, that we are in a turning point in the way that we educate young people, that the work that we did to build the schools of the 20th century so that they really served our nation well by preparing kids to go to work in a workforce that was very different, sort of a factory-based workforce, an office-based workforce, a service-based workforce, is different today. That we can't anticipate how jobs are going to change. Some people refer to this day and age as the rise of the smart machine. And we know that a lot of jobs are going to get wiped out because anything that a human can do that's repetitious, there is someone out there who is either already figured out or is figuring out how to replace that repetitious work done by a human with a machine. But what I see is that when kids get opportunities to work with something like our GIS curriculum, what we are doing is helping them build out of what some believe are the really important ways of humans taking on machines and actually being better at the work than the machines are. And that is the generation of creativity, the emotional intelligence that people bring to the work that they do with each other, the kind of critical thinking and analysis work that while machines can do some of that, being able to do that in an integrated way is still something that's a real challenge for machines. And being able to really bring together a focus that says, this is work that can't be replicated, and that's what the human brain does best, is we are creators and generators of new ideas. I see that as happening in a GIS class in a way that's very different than you might see in other more old school factory-based models of teaching and learning.